Welcome to this episode of Pondering Play and Therapy with me, Julie, and today my special guest, Frankie. Frankie, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you.
And Frankie, we know each other in another context.
We do.
Over the last 2 years, you've been one of my students at Roehampton University. What is it you've been studying at Roehampton?
So a master's in play therapy. Yeah, 2 years full time.
And that just finished in July. 2 years full time. And
yeah,
you did
done.
it. Congratulations. and you'll get to graduate in a few months' time. Work-wise, have you managed to start a little bit of work?
Yes, it came as a bit of a snowball, so that was quite unexpected. But yeah, I'm working as much as I'd like to. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Congratulations on that. And
Thank
so
you.
we're shifting now, aren't we, from student and lecturer into professional colleagues. And as part of that, I'm going to interview you this afternoon about your research that you did. So you and all your peers, and hello to all the Roehampton graduates of 2025. As part of your master's, you studied research and research methods so that you could read and understand articles and chapters about other people's research.
Yes.
We spent a whole chunk of time doing that, didn't we? And then you get the opportunity to plan and carry out your own research. And your research was about play therapy and young carers.
Yes. Yeah.
And it was an absolutely super piece of research. And I had the privilege of supervising that research. So I know it quite well. Frankie, first of all, tell us, if you can, what does the term young carer mean? And we're working in a UK context, so tell us what that term means.
Yeah, so young carers are children under the age of 18 that provide emotional or physical practical care for a family member. Yeah, and it's mostly an agreed term. It's much more seen in Western countries, but it is starting to get some traction in non-Western countries as well.
There's always, thank you, within a research project, the first chapter is always about why you've chosen this subject.
Yeah.
So what was it? What was it about your life or things that you were interested in that said, I want to spend 8 months of my life studying this?
Yeah, so my previous life and my previous career was working with adults with learning disabilities and mostly in respite care. And I spent a lot of time talking to siblings and parents. And I had some really eye-opening conversations with siblings about how they reflect back on their childhood as young carers and how they realize that it's affected their mental health and their relationship building. And that's always really stuck with me. I also have a close family member who's a young carer, so personal experience too. But in part of my placement, I had a young carer being referred. I did my due diligence and tried to research about young carers and play therapy and just found absolutely nothing. And so, yeah, I saw a gap, as you will. Yeah.
A huge gap. Yeah. So that personal impetus, something that was within your own family circles, but within your professional circles, before you did your training and during your training, actually meeting young carers. But it's really interesting that you met people who had previously been young carers, reflecting back on their now adults, but reflecting back.
Yeah, and some of the conversations, I remember them so clearly because the conversations, some of them went along the lines of, I lost my parents the day that such and such was born. I remember not being invited to things because I knew I couldn't go. So it's all of those kind of really big feelings. And it's really important that they're going to therapy now and they're getting the support. But actually, it's really interesting that it wasn't really a thing when they were younger. So yeah, it was something that's always really stuck with me, those conversations.
So a sense that for you looking back on that and helping them to look back on their young lives, that they could have benefited from something like play therapy when they were much younger and in that role.
Yeah, and the research talks about looking at kind of older adolescents and talking about therapy within adult life and looking back, but actually play therapy is perfectly placed to support the children as they need it in the moment, so that maybe in later life they've been able to work it through already to a point.
So our training, the training that you've been through and I went through exactly the same training about 20 years before you, is primarily for 8 to 12-year-olds, would normally be our client age group. But of course, we can work with younger children and we can work with adolescents. We could even work with adults. Primarily, we see play as the language in that sort of primary school age, 4 to 11, 4 to 12. And you saw the gap in the what did the literature tell you? Because there's that horrendous 2,500 word literature review. How did you manage to find 2,500 words to write about therapy and young carers when you knew really from the start there wasn't anything there?
Luckily, I had a really great supervisor that helped me out. But yeah, it was really tough. There's a lot of research on young carers and how difficult it is. There's strong links to depression and stress and isolation and interrupted identity development and all of those things. And a very short section was about the positives. There are some great things about being a young carer, personality trait development, like young carers tend to be more empathetic, have more maturity and resilience and stuff. And there's also quite a lot of protective factors that can protect the child when they're being a young carer. There's also quite a lot about young carers groups and the things that they are doing in policies and things. But there's just very little on therapeutic interventions and the therapeutic needs of these children. And there is a few more recent studies talking about early interventions, but nothing about what to do with them or who they are or what we do or how we do it. So yeah, there was at the end of the literature review very nicely went, we don't have anything, we need more. What is this? What does therapeutic interventions for children that are young carers look like?
So you really identified that gap. There, as you said, there are, certainly in the UK, there are young carer support groups, sometimes run by the local authority, sometimes run by charities.
Yeah.
But I'm getting the sense that they don't focus on providing therapeutic services. But what would their focus be? Can you just help us understand that?
Yeah, so they are a wonderful provision for respite. And there's a lot of research about how bringing young carers together can support their identity progression and their understanding of who they are and why they're maybe slightly different to their peers and celebrating that. But I've done a couple of talks with young carer charities in my local area talking about my research. And there are just some young carers on their books that need a little bit more than that. And that's where it's important to look at what's there, what more there is. And some charities have kind of support workers for young carers, but therapeutic interventions around mental health seems to be a gap.
Especially, I think, as you said, in the younger age group, that might be thought about in later adolescence and early adulthood.
Yes.
Therapeutic intervention. But there seems to be, or you seem to find this gap about even something like play therapy being thought about by the support workers as a thing that exists.
Yeah, and so when I went and did the talks in the young carer network and charities, it's very much, oh yes, I didn't really know about it. I know that we can do talking therapies for adolescents and we can refer on to this and that, but actually there is something for that younger group, and that younger group is the ones that maybe don't articulate themselves and are struggling. And so it's important just to have that awareness that there are options therapeutically for the younger children.
So you had your rationale, reason for wanting to go and do it. You went and did a fabulous literature review, a sort of scope around to prove that there isn't anything that specifically looks at young carers and therapeutic interventions, and particularly the 4 to 12-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so that very nicely led you into that wonderful sentence that we hope students can get to, which is, there is a gap in the literature which I now hope to fill.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. So what did you do? What was your method? How did you go and find something?
Yes. I interviewed 3 play therapists. I used a creative method, and I think it was really valuable. So at the beginning of my interviews, I asked the play therapist to create a sound tray. Now, we do this as play therapist trainees, we do it constantly, creating sound trays to help symbolically express what we're feeling. And so I asked them to do a sound tray to reflect their experiences with young carers in the playroom. And I think this brought a lot of depth to what we discussed. They responded that it deepened their recall of their experience and helped them access the memories and see themes more holistically using the sound tray. And it was very much an idea that I wasn't seeking an answer. The study's aim was to allow the meaning to emerge. I didn't go in going, I know play therapy is absolutely great for young carers. So it was very much a tell me about your experience that led the way, which is why we went for qualitative rather than quantitative, because it just didn't feel like it fit the kind of exploratory nature rather than a measurement of something.
Yeah. So I think what you said there is so important for any research. And sometimes I think as a play therapist, I'm constantly a researcher and noticer. When I'm with my clients, I've been with clients this morning and I'll be with clients almost immediately after we finish this interview today. But that sense of I am not looking for something. I am not looking to prove something when I'm playing with my clients.
Yeah.
That I'm open to seeing what comes, seeing what emerges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Finding out, noticing what their experience of themselves is. So that phenomenological, the lived experiences.
Yes. Yeah,
so
absolutely.
That's interesting because it's not all researchers who are in the position that you are. You wanted to research something that was also part of your private life, part of your personal life.
Yes.
Quite closely. And so was that hard then in creating your interview questions? Because you had some loose questions that you needed to wanted to wander through.
Yes.
Was it hard not to steer the questions in a direction to confirm what you've experienced?
Oh, do you know, it wasn't that, because I just kept returning to, we know nothing about this yet. So I just need to gain information. This is an information gathering rather than a decision of any kind. And actually, the therapist that I interviewed provided such insight and experience into how they experience young carers in the playroom that it was quite easy to kind of take myself out of the personal and put myself following them through their experiences.
So when they created their sand trays, they do that in the interview, or did they do that before the interview and then send you a picture of it? Or you were in the room with one of your interviewers?
Yeah. And so I sat there in silence, and I did say, you can talk out loud, we can do whatever makes you feel comfortable. So in each interview, they did it while I was there.
Okay.
And some of them narrated and some of them didn't. And then the question at the end was, tell me about your sound tray. And that brought such vivid exploration. And it was all of them, instead of choosing to be one particular child, I said it can be one child or it can be your experience in general. A lot of them, all of them said, I started off with one child, but actually they all have similar themes and they all have, it's very similar. That was really powerful, I felt.
So that sense of, even for them, they're researching into themselves in the creating of the sound tray.
Absolutely.
And then in the exploring of the sound tray with somebody else, that is like layer after layer gets revealed. And it can be a surprise even to the person being interviewed. They don't know what they're about to say and what they're about to discover.
Yes, absolutely.
And Frankie, can I just backtrack a little bit about how did you find your 3 participants? What was the rationale for them? Did they have to work with young carers?
Yes. So they had to have experience of working with young carers and be BAPT therapists, so British Association of Play Therapy. And it was just through Facebook. So the university contacted BAPT, they put it on the Facebook page. And actually, goodness, BAPT just turned up. I got 3 people straight away. They were so humble and understanding of when I could do and what I could do. And they really did put themselves out there. It was wonderful. And I hope to do that for the next cohorts to come, because it really was a fantastic experience.
Yeah, the sort of professional generosity that gets passed from one cohort into the next. Yeah. So thank you to those 3 and to everybody else in the BAT community who has contributed to research over the years, because we really need you, and thank you for that. And so you had your interviews for an hour long each?
Yes, some a little bit more, some a little bit less. But
about an hour. 2 on the internet, 1 face to face. And then eventually you get to some themes. How do you get from this huge 3 hours worth of discussion? How do you get from that to a couple of pages of, and these are my themes?
It's a very long process. And it takes a lot of reflection and self-reflection. It was thematic analysis. There's a word before that I can't think of right now. Thank you.
RTA.
Do you know what? That bit has been taken out of my mind, because that was the tough bit. I think it's been banished from my mind. Yeah, so continually looking at what has come up in terms of exactly what they've said, noting the themes, noting which ones go together, reflecting constantly on myself as a researcher, because obviously, because I have that personal side, it's important to understand my biases. And if you, for example, read the interviews, you would probably see differences. So I had to make sure that I was able to really stand up with what came out and why it came out, using the quotes and the themes. And what came out was quite poignant and quite strong, and hopefully makes sense.
It did make a lot of sense. And I think what you said there is really important, that it's not that there are themes there waiting to be found by anybody. So that if you and another student had swapped data, had swapped all your transcripts, you'd have been able to come up with the same themes. It's really important that you did your analysis and you are part of the developing themes rather than thinking of finding themes. And I remember we talked about that a lot, to develop things that are common between your participants, but also sometimes it can be things that are very different between your participants.
Absolutely. And I think it was really important to be transparent within the dissertation that there were some disparities, but also the level of personal impotence I had in the data. So I was very aware of that. So I felt at some points I was becoming like the fourth interviewed person, because I kept thinking about my view on things. And I had to take a step back and go, okay, but that's not what I'm doing here. Let's just focus on what these three people are saying, because obviously I'm not I wasn't a play therapist yet at that point, and also not and had a different head on. So it was really important that I continued to just be aware of where I was placing myself and my experience within the data.
But inevitably it's in there.
Oh, yes, 100%.
Because you've noticed themes that are interesting to you and resonate with you.
Yeah.
And you were a trainee play therapist, and you were working with a young carer, so you were working with it professionally. So yeah, that's a really tricky but exciting part of it, is not to deny that you exist as the analyst.
Yes.
But also keeping track of that and noting that. And I know you kept a reflective journal about where do young carers fit in your life, what are you drawn to, and then going back to the coloured pens across all those transcripts.
Yeah,
Post-it
I did
notes.
a lot of printing ink. I printed out a number of times.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I know you went about that manually. You didn't get a machine to do that for you. You didn't submit it to AI and get AI to bring up your themes.
No, I'm very much a manual person. I'm the person that sits there with a notebook. And so getting out and feeling it felt really important to me. So I didn't use there's certain reflective thematic analysis programs and things, and it just didn't feel how I could work. But other people did, and it worked really well for them. So I think it's just personal impetus and what works for them.
So you came up with 4 themes. I'm going to ask you now what those are. We both got it written down, Frankie, so don't worry.
Yeah, it's fine.
It's a message to anybody who's ever does any research. You're not expected to remember it all off by heart. And you can go back to your notes and find it. So just name those 4 themes for us, and then I'm going to ask you about each one separately. Just give them the main names. Number 1,
Do you know,
2, 3.
I don't think I've got the names. What I've got is my version of the names.
Okay, I've got them here.
You got them in your.
Okay, can I read those out to you?
Yes.
Here and see if these make sense to you? So I've got the first theme you came up with was the burden of being a young carer, that kind of emotional weight, having to be the good one.
Yeah.
The hidden self.
Yes.
Yeah. Interrupted childhood. That was all
in
that first theme.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm looking to the side. If anybody's watching this on YouTube, I'm looking to the side because that's where I've got it down. The burden of being a young carer. And then that second one, and I just found, I remember when I read this one or first saw it, it was really poignant because you've called it silenced voices, expressive play.
Yes.
And I'm really interested that you didn't call it silent voices. It's silenced. CED on the end. So I'm really interested in that. Silenced voices, as though somebody else has imposed that silence. I think that was really poignant. And then you have, on a much more sort of practical basis, and I'm sure your participants talked about this, was the systemic gaps. What isn't being seen, the invisible child, and the systemic gaps that while it's meeting, the systems are meeting many needs, they're not often noticing for young carers, their emotional needs. And then your final one, and this was the surprise one, wasn't it?
This was.
The endings. And it still catches me when I read it, that sense of it's never enough. The dilemma of ending therapy with a young carer because their caring duties have not ended.
Yes.
Or rarely end. Sometimes they end with the death of the cared for, the parent being cared for, the sibling being cared for, whoever that person is. and sometimes that does happen, but more often the young carer remains a young carer until the young disappears, and then
they're just a carer. Yeah, absolutely.
But that sense of it's never enough.
Yeah.
How can I possibly end with this client when they're still in the situation that's potentially causing them pain and distress?
And all of the people I interviewed talked about that emotional complexity and how difficult it was, and when to end. The question of when to end was brought throughout every single interview. When do I end with this client? Because actually they're still going through it. At what point do I go, okay, we've done our work here, and I'm passing the baton on to the next thing? And quite a lot of talk was around what safety nets can we put in place, and also how do we support ourselves as therapists? What support can we lean on? Because actually it was tough. It was really tough ending with these particular cohort of children.
That was theme 4. Let's think a bit more about that then, because one of the things as play therapists, and I expect lots of other therapists, when you're deciding to begin work with a client, one of the things we think about is the stability in this family. Are there other people in the family, usually the grown-ups, maybe an older sibling, but usually a parent, a grandparent, a foster carer, who is able to support the therapy and bring the child, collect the child, support the child either side of their therapy. Really be around for them. And also we often look for, has the difficulty, the experience ended, and is the child available for therapy psychologically? Now with young carers, none of those are present. Because often the family is not in a stable state, because they have a person within their unit that needs a huge amount of attention. And so even, how does therapy even get started for a young carer?
And it's difficult, and it was something that was actually put in the third one, that sometimes they're not turning up because actually someone else has an appointment that's more important, because it's a medical appointment or something like that. More important's not maybe the right word, but there are those actual physical, can we turn up for this child? Can we attend reviews? Can we hold space for this child? Because actually we've got so much going on. And I guess it's to each therapist's own understanding, in each case and each family. Are they ready to take this on? And I know in assessment meetings, that's something that is really important to look at with young carers, in terms of, do you have capacity? Is it going to be to the detriment of this child to open all these Pandora boxes of these tricky feelings, of all these difficulties? Or do we need to wait a little bit longer and it be a little bit more steady? I don't think you're ever going to get to 100% steady. So it's just working out when the time's as ideal as possible.
So those perhaps unique challenges at the beginning of the therapy, but also unique challenges, as your 4th theme said, about the end of the therapy. And was there anything, thinking about that 4th theme and the ending, how do endings work in therapy for young carers who are still caring? What were your participants saying about that? They recognized it, but what were some of their thoughts around that we could learn from?
And I think it was one, very much you need to have the support network for you into clinical supervision, something like that. So an awareness is actually, this is going to maybe be tough. Prepare yourself, because I don't think any of them were prepared for how tough it felt for them. But also things like safety nets for young carers. So then having real strong connections with the school, for the school to understand in much more detail than maybe they would do, the importance of young carers, what they are coming to school with, and having that person just catching them every now and again and going, are we okay? Is this okay? So they've got that extra person at school just to touch base with, and understanding that they might come back. And I know we feel that in play therapy in general, we say we could, if it gets wobbly again, we're not closing a door, but maybe the parents and everyone else are aware that actually, if it does start to get all wobbly again, there is an opportunity for them to come back and have that space and that time.
Yeah, I like that. I can see that how important that is. So being the advocate for the child, in the family and in the school.
Yeah, and again, that went back to the finding three, the therapist frequently becoming the advocate for visibility of the child, how much they're bringing, how much they're coming. Yes, they're having difficulties with friendships and they just need to get over it because they're 8 and everyone has difficulties with friendships. Let's just think about what they're coming to school with, and understanding that it's much more complicated than that, or that they're the good child, if you will, and they're going to be quiet and they're going to say yes and they're going to be amenable and they're going to put your needs before everyone else's, but what that means to them and their emotional tolerance and resilience and stuff is really important as a therapist for young carers.
Yeah, and I can see how it's almost like we're doing your analysis backwards, how the themes overlap.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And I just want to go back to that one about the ending, where you said about the therapist protecting themselves, or the ending with a young carer being particularly difficult. And I've never worked with young carers, or I've never knowingly worked with a young carer.
Yeah.
And I think we've talked about that. Why would that be more difficult than ending with any of my clients? Many of my clients, I feel, we've not solved everything.
Yeah.
Things have got better, but they're still not perfect. They're still
Yes.
living in the housing they're living. They're still, granddad is still dead. You know,
Yes.
granddad died, granddad is still dead.
Yes. Yeah.
Why, I'm interested why your participants said ending with a young carer client needs particular protection and care for them as the therapist. Have you got any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think it was that probably the funding didn't allow for maybe the ending that they wanted to. And, or there was a few conversations about just not knowing when to end and taking that to therapy for weeks and weeks going, are they ready? Are they not ready? Mum's got an appointment for something in 3 weeks and that might blow everything up again. So should we just hold on for a little bit longer? And I know the summer holidays are really tough. And so should we just come back and see where we're landing? And so I think there was quite a lot of when is the right time to leave and how difficult those conversations were. And then leaving and maybe feeling like and this is spitballing, this didn't come up, but maybe feeling like you're leaving and you're being the biggest advocate for this child, and that maybe taking away that advocacy is difficult if you're not leaving with a school system that understands them, maybe. Because I think it's still quite an invisible thing. It's oh yes, they're young carers, tick on the form. Okay, we need to be aware of that. But the awareness of the burden and the emotional needs of young carers is still not really understood and not really seen within the school system. And so, yeah, that advocacy probably helps you to feel as a therapist that you've been able to leave with someone still checking and still being okay, keeping an eye on that child.
Yeah, and I get that then now about the pain and the real discomfort when that isn't in place, or you can't trust that it's going to be able to remain in place. And that's really your third theme and your fourth theme together, the systemic challenges, and then leading into that bit about the endings.
Mm.
And what you said earlier in the introduction about young carer support groups, just not being aware that something like psychological therapy using play is available, exists.
Yeah, and then the funding to go with it.
Yeah,
It's a perfect storm.
that is a perfect storm. Even knowing that it exists in the first place, that to be funded.
Yes.
And then just thinking about the other themes, the first theme and the second theme seem to be much more about actually what's going on for the child. And that second theme, the one that you called silenced voices, and then the opposite of that, expressive play. Presumably that came out of what your participants noticed with their clients in the playroom, in what was happening in the room. Yeah, tell us a bit about that.
And I don't think you said earlier about it being silenced from other people, and I don't think it is. I think it's them silencing themselves.
Ooh,
so it's silenced. They've silenced themselves. They've suppressed their needs. They're so interested in being the good child. They need to be quiet while their sibling has medical needs or has big feelings and behaviors that are difficult. And they just need to sit there in the shop when it's difficult, or they just have to be quiet while we're at the hospital. And what the interviewed play therapist found was they found that non-directive part of play therapy really tough to begin with, because actually I don't understand how to be the good one here. I don't know what is expected of me in this room. I need you to tell me the formula so that I can get your needs met without really thinking about what their needs are and what their identity is. And so having that really that space where it's so predictable and you can do anything in here. What do you want to do? And they're going, I don't know. What do you want to do? This is not how life works. I get told where to be and what to do, and my needs are suppressed by myself and maybe others as well, because I need to look after everyone else. And so having that space in the room has really enabled them to play out what they need. And there was lots of talk around the emotions that they did end up playing out when they felt safe and they felt like they had that therapeutic relationship around things like frustration, shame, resentment, all of those things that actually the interviewees said that these children might never express verbally, but were able to express it through play. And so that expressive play part of the name was how much they needed to express their feelings, but actually they were silencing themselves because their needs were seen as quite far down, and they didn't quite even know how to express their needs sometimes.
Yeah, so that opportunity, this is the real crux of child-centered, non-directive space, where we say this is the time and space for you to do. I would always preface it with just about anything.
Just about,
right?
absolutely. Yeah,
you can do anything. Actually, no, you really can't.
Yeah. Well, wait a minute, let me put in these limits.
yeah, let's keep an eye to that. And thinking about our limit setting and limit keeping is so important for children. To be expressive is to know that we will keep it safe, that we will say, oh, hang on, okay, that's not okay in here, but I'll tell you what, you could do this, and we redirect. We spend a lot of the training practicing that with one another.
Yes.
But that, I can imagine what that's like then for a young person, say an 8-year-old who is a young carer in their family because, say, an older sibling has got a physical medical need. And the parents are at appointments, their holidays are around the care and capacity of their sibling. And picking up that it's not okay or there isn't space for their voice. And then how weird that must be to be in a playroom, like you're sitting in your playroom, I'm sitting in my playroom. How uncomfortable that in itself may feel.
Yes.
A young carer to
Yes,
like have
absolutely.
somebody to say, in here you can do and say just about anything you like. Should we see what happens?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did they get stuck?
Yes. Yeah. And I think it took a little while and quite a lot, including my experience. It took quite a lot to get them to express themselves and help them to understand that actually they can do almost anything. Lots of, what do you want to do? I've chosen that, now it's your turn. And it's that beautiful empathy and the maturity and all of those things that is a great strength of being a young carer, but actually it also makes your own identity and your own needs go a little bit skewy, if you will. And so the non-directive kind of will just wait until you're ready to express yourselves how you want to express yourselves, and then practicing that within the playroom in a non-directive way seemed like the power of play therapy with young carers.
So it was what was expressed, but way before that was that whole process of knowing and feeling and experiencing that I, as a young carer, can express something to an adult without me needing to take care of that adult.
Yes.
So that first chunk of the therapy, or it could be the bulk of the therapy, could be just finding a voice.
Yes.
A child with an adult, with that power dynamic that's there, without that need to look after the adult.
Yeah, absolutely.
How powerful that must have been for those clients. And then once they found that voice, was there anything, I'm thinking about the second theme, was there anything particular about what a young carer might typically express in their play that might in any way be different to children who are not young carers? Was there anything particular about their themes?
I think there was a lot of words like shame and the exploration of sometimes not liking someone and how that felt, and loving someone but finding that difficult. And so all of these feelings that are really difficult for adults to understand and are in little bodies trying to work itself out. Actually, I love my sister. She's really important to me. But also, I don't love that we have to do this. And sometimes I'm not allowed to play this, or I'm not allowed to have this because of her needs or his needs or whatever. So I think it was exploring what that meant and the shame around feeling that coming out.
A sense of I ought not to be feeling this feeling.
Yes.
Yeah. And as we know in the work that the practice that we have as non-directive play therapists, that sense of that's very rarely going to come out in a direct conversation. That will come out through a story or a role play or in figures in a sand tray. It will come through a metaphor rather than when I see my sister, I feel this. It's like when the big monster comes against the little monster and the big monster is climbing the wall or whatever they're doing. It's often in that symbolic distance, isn't it? That therapists will get a sense of what a child is experiencing. And our clients very rarely sit down and tell us how they feel.
Yeah, exactly. And I think what has led quite a lot of these young carers to be referred in the first place is they've pushed down their needs so much that actually it's starting to bubble out and they can't keep it down. And so quite a lot of the interviews were obviously being they were a young carer wasn't the reason they were referred. They were referred because suddenly they're acting so differently to how they normally act. They're this quiet, shy person, but actually they're having these huge meltdowns that we don't quite understand. And being able to keep all of those emotions and suppress everything and be okay is a lot. So just having that space and that time with someone in that trusting environment to have those big scary feelings, and the permission to do without judgment seemed to be really key for young carers.
Yeah, I'm always imagining myself as that young carer and what potentially a huge relief that is once that trust has been developed, but how hard it might be to get to that trust.
Yes. Yeah.
And then I'm thinking, going back, we've looked at 4, 3, and 2, that first theme, that sense of being a burden, being a burden, and also the burden of being a young carer, the emotional weight that you're carrying, that sense of having to always be the good one. And you came across a phrase that one of our previous students, I think, had researched on it the year before about glass children.
Yes,
I've never
absolutely.
come across that term.
If you haven't seen the TED Talk, see it. Find it
okay, tell us about this theme, which is around being a glass child as well, the burden, but also tell us what that term glass child means.
Yeah, so not the point of my research, so I might get it wrong. I'm very sorry if I do, Jill. But if it's being seen through, so it's not about being fragile, it's about being seen through and having to not be as seen within the family that you're in because of the other needs of the people. And it's become a bit more of a voice, and I'm probably not explaining it very well, so apologies. But it explains quite a lot of the children that the people that we were talking about in the interviews. It's okay, it's fine, kind of meek and mean, and actually how they're suffering from within, some of them. And I think it's really important to say that young carers, it's a spectrum. And there's some young carers that actually support from young carers groups and having that respite, and they've got other protective factors in their life and they're doing well. But there are those children that just need that little bit more.
Yeah, so it's not making the assumption that because somebody is a young carer, they should have play therapy.
Yes.
You're certainly not saying that.
All children should have play therapy. But no.
That's an aside. That's another episode. No. But yeah, that sense of, and I think you have explained that well, being a glass child doesn't mean that you're fragile, that property of glass, but it's the property of being transparent, being looked through and not seen, not being reflected back. That you're not a mirror, you're a piece of glass that is being seen through. And as you said, there is a fabulous TED Talk about that. And so that sense of how, as a young carer, do you build your identity when you don't have others reflecting back to you? What is being reflected back to you is that, oh, you're the good girl or boy, you're the helpful one, you're the quiet one. Thank you for not being a nuisance.
Yes. And thank goodness for you, because actually I have enough to deal with. The pressure to be the good one, the pressure to be the one that mum doesn't have to worry about is significant.
So how do you build your own identity as that child when you're being fed so much of your identity in a certain way? So that first theme is all about that kind of the hidden self, that hidden identity, and how potentially in play therapy for some young carers, that may be an opportunity to explore different identities, different sense of self, different
Yeah.
self-worth for different values, not just the
Yes.
values that are being placed on you by family members in your role, that
Yeah.
you are more than a young carer.
Yes. And I think that's exactly it. You are a young carer. We understand, knowing that and understanding that your life is at home may be slightly different to others. And that's why sometimes it's hard. Just like any label, I imagine. Identifying with that is really important, but also understanding that's not your only identity and exploring the other bits, the other wonderful bits of you.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and so that leads us very neatly then on to you did a wonderful discussion of how your literature and your own experience matched up or didn't match up with your themes. So that was the big discussion part. And then eventually you end up with some recommendations. Now, of course, we could ask you, if you were in charge of the budget, if you were in charge of social services, if you were in charge of the health service, what would underlie your recommendations? What came out of your research that you feel is missing and could be noticed?
I think probably the key is that for people to know that there is therapeutic interventions that would be helpful for young carers, and young carers, so not adolescents, not when you get to adulthood, actually early interventions and putting in the support in place when they're struggling as within it day to day is an option. I think just having that awareness is key. I know that there's programs going on in schools about identifying young carers and teachers being more aware of what that means. I think that needs to be strengthened. And therefore what they might present. So this idea of the good child, this idea of the glass child, what that means and how they might present in a different way. But that doesn't mean that they're doing fine because they're quiet in your classroom and we don't need to worry about them. It's just that awareness of what that might be holding for them. And then again, goes back to the budget to be able to provide targeted support for those young carers that are in need of it. Because when I spoke to young carers group, the big question at the end was, okay, great, play therapy, amazing. I've got people on my caseload that I think would really benefit from this. How do we get the funding? And we all looked around and went, yeah, I know it's bad, isn't it? So I think pots of targeted money that's going to the young carers charities or can be accessed by people in the know that understand and can identify the children that need more support is really valuable.
So that having young carers' psychological needs for some young carers to have that noticed, to build the awareness amongst professionals and amongst families, thinking about supporting families to notice without adding to their burden.
Yes.
And then having the information out there as therapists and social workers to know that play therapy and other interventions for young children that involve play in some way, using that child's voice, exist and are available, and that there are people in localities who can offer that.
Yeah.
And then, as always, thinking, then how do we draw down some funding? Who funds that? How is that made possible through charitable funding, statutory funding, and so on? And if you had a message, Frankie, for therapists and professionals, there's the people are listening into the podcast who are not therapeutic practitioners, but are other professionals working with young people, children, and play in some way, what might be a message to them?
Oh, that's a good question. I think just notice and spend time noticing the ones that aren't shouting. I think that's the thing that I got the most from my study was that they're invisible in society sometimes, and they're invisible sometimes within their own families, and they're invisible at school. And so just having that awareness of how young carers might be presenting and checking in and giving them some time is really valuable.
And I think you've said many important things there, but that noticing the quiet ones, the ones that are not making a fuss, and also using that word might, that speculation, or that it could be that something's wobbling them, could be that they're a quiet child and quite happy.
Yes, absolutely.
But not making presumptions that you're a young carer, therefore you might need therapy, but also not presuming because you're quiet, you don't need therapy.
Yeah.
Or you wouldn't benefit from therapy. So keeping that word might, could be, possible, potential in the mix all the time, and seeing the individual child and their family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Frankie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
For getting your dissertation published in an audible way. So hopefully now you'll feel that your dissertation is out there. I've learned so much from you about young carers, about my practice as a therapist, thinking about families that potentially.
And I have to say, I don't put myself in the expert. Very much the people that I interviewed were the ones that are amazing, and I've taken my hat off to them, and they've just been, they were so generous with their time.
We thank those 3 forever anonymous DAPT play therapists. You'll know who you are. And as always, thinking about a piece of research, you are building on all the experts or all the researchers before you. You now offer this nugget of research, and others will come after you to do more focused research. So don't encourage you not to deny your part in that lineage of being a researcher. But for now, thank you for listening to or watching this episode of Pondering Play and Therapy. If you can subscribe, or please send us a message, please do. We like getting messages. We like getting comments. If you've got any comments for Frankie, please put them in the comment sections wherever you're listening or watching. But that's it for today. And we'll say cheerio and thank you to Frankie.
Thank you.